Welcome back, AI curious folk. Back to AI Ramblings, episode 56 this Thursday. I'm Michael Parekh, your human AI host and guide. I want to talk about a number of things that are pretty interesting, but they have to do with how we're going to see AI speed bumps along the road, even though these technologies are moving at an exponential rate, just up and to the right, in many cases, hockey stick kind of things. There are a lot of AI speed bumps ahead for both companies and for services. For today, I want to focus on three of them and then talk about AI gadgets and AI friction points there as well. So let's get into it. First up is the friction in AI shopping. As many of you may know, as we transition from AI chatbots to AI agents, and all of the major companies, Anthropic, OpenAI, etc., are all aggressively pursuing AI shopping opportunities for their agents. Why? Because that's where the money is, as they say, Willie Loman. Go where the banks are, where the money is, and so that is the driver. And we're finding early indications, and I've written extensively about this in a couple of posts. Again, all these numbers will be in the show notes, specifically AI reset to zero, post 702 and 669 in particular. And my point back then was that AI agents, as they roll out, the internet as we know it today over the last 25 years is just not designed for it. And it's designed to kind of actually put up barriers and so on. And as these bots basically go out and try and shop for us, we're going to find more resistance as the stuff needs to be integrated in today's computer systems. A lot of them are years of legacy systems across verticals, and retailing is notorious for this. But specifically here, there's a counterintuitive thing that came up in the information. I had a good piece on this, which I'll again have in the show notes as well. One of the big payment processing companies, Adyen, is pointing out, their senior executive for AI shopping is pointing out that they're seeing data that AI is basically driving a lot more refunds and introducing some fraud risk into retail shopping. And that's an issue for obviously a lot of the retailers, and they're immediately putting up a lot more barriers to AI agent shopping because returns are a big cost item for retailers. And so that, essentially slows down the take rates and the advance of AI agents into the shopping arena. And so it's an interesting data point. There's a lot more detail in the article. I would, if you're interested, go read the whole thing. And I'll have a couple other links, as I said, to my posts on this topic. But my overall take here is that we're just at the beginning of the beginning for AI agents, and we're absolutely at the beginning of the beginning of the beginning of AI shopping via AI agents. And of course, there are going to be a lot of retailers who will try and lean into this opportunity to garner more business against their competitors, but a lot of them are going to protect their business lines. And we saw this with online retail in the mid 90s. I was I was head of internet research at Goldman and spent a lot of time in the early days of Amazon. Jeff Bezos, as he was out there knocking on doors to get music publishers and consumers basically buying CDs in the old days. The theory by a lot of observers was, hey, this of course people will buy CDs online very fast, and they did, and Amazon saw the growth rates. Ironically, it took over 20 years for online shopping to become even maybe 15, 20% of overall retail. Even today, it is not as big as one might think, because if you exclude the multi-trillion-dollar spend for groceries, online retail is still a relatively small part of actual retail. So these things take a long time. And we're talking about, as we talk about AI in terms of searching for things using AI. Of course, AI is going to help a lot on that. But actually using AI agents to do a lot of shopping, it will happen. And early adopters and early developers and companies are going to have a lot of opportunity to build some interesting things. But this is a slow and steady game that's going to take years. And so let's kind of watch this, but there is a lot of friction ahead in AI shopping with agents. Second take I want to talk about is Again, this is just headwinds and friction for one of the core companies that I've been arguing is going to be really benefiting from AI, and that is Apple. There was some news again. The information had a story basically saying that they're sending over 200 of the developers around Siri, which is has been a lot in the news for Apple of late, specifically because AI features, AI-enabled Siri has been delayed by months. Recently, you see Apple partnered with Google, paying them over $1 billion to use their Gemini with Siri and other parts of Apple's ecosystem of hardware and software. And so that's the good news. They also had big management changes, shifting the responsibilities to the head of software, Craig Federighi. And I've written a lot about this as well, specifically post number 1051 on AI RTZ. And there'll be links to that and links to the article in question here as well. But this is going to be a key area that the media is going to focus on because, again, Apple, again, has seen a lot of headwind in terms of a lot of their AI people have been hired away, specifically by Zuckerberg personally. In many cases, the head of design was taken, their people were taken by Meta for its hardware ambitions, etc. So Apple having to basically send a couple of hundred of their developers on Siri, essentially to boot camp to learn AI or latest AI or whatever, is a headwinds type of story for Apple. We'll see if this impacts their launch of AI-enabled Siri that is expected later this year, most likely around WWDC, which is their big worldwide developer conference, typically in June. But my assessment would be that Apple basically does execute through this, especially as they're partnered with Google. So a headwind, but I still, from my take point of view, Apple remains, in my mind, one of the best positioned companies, mainstream big tech companies, to leverage AI across its applications, across devices, and all the things we're talking about. And they will get their AI people in order sooner than later, would be my assumption here. So we'll see, but it will be in the news, and there'll be a lot of this story is catnip for the media, and so we'll see a lot of coverage on this issue going forward. The third element where I want to talk about friction points, again, in this case, it's of course Anthropic, the superstar company right now that's in the news, rapidly becoming even potentially the Coke against Pepsi against OpenAI. They're sibling companies, as you know, and Anthropic of late, I've talked a lot about that, their upcoming model Mythos with all the cybersecurity warnings the company is putting out there and working with dozens of companies and also developers and also the government at various levels, the highest levels in many cases. And so is OpenAI for their Spud model. The latest here is that Anthropic now is considering requiring government ID for certain capabilities to essentially counterattack on the fraud abuse side of things. Now, this is interesting because Anthropic is doing this, I think, proactively without any regulatory impetus. They're doing it in the context of showing that they're taking the initiative on security. They're leaning in rather toward the cybersecurity fire rather than running away from it, waiting for people to tell them to ask for ID. But it also will have a negative reaction in many quarters in terms of friction point because they're doing it unilaterally by themselves. Presumably, others will follow in terms of peers. We'll see. Again, it's for certain capabilities, a lot of details to be figured out. But right now, there's a lot of stories that write themselves. Anthropic, no ID, no AI. And we'll see how wide and deep that goes, but it is absolutely on brand. My take is that it's absolutely on brand for Anthropic, especially as they are one of the two, what I called the other day, guardians of the AI galaxy, self-appointed guardians of the AI galaxy. And this is absolutely on brand, on point for them and potentially gives them more media advantage than not, and also potentially aligns them a little bit more with regulatory authorities, not just here in the U.S. but around the world. Their Claude Code and Claude Cowork products are just up into the right hockey stick adoptions by millions of developers, and so this is a notable move by the company to be out in front of this cybersecurity issue, especially as they roll out their next generation models. The next element I want to talk about is gadgets and AI. One of my favorite topics that I talk about on AI Ramblings every day. And the issue here is ambient AI recording of the world around us and our issues with trust and privacy and regulations as well through our PCs and smartphones. I've written a lot about this as well. The thing that triggers it for today is there were more headwinds, again talking about friction points, for Microsoft in this case. They've been actually very aggressive rolling out Copilot for Windows, Copilot for Office 365, especially with their recall feature, which they introduced about a year and a half, 2 years ago, 2 years ago. And I've written about that as well, specifically in AI Reset to Zero 363 and 382. Again, the links will be in the show notes. The, this has been a trouble piece of software where this is basically capability where the system, unless you turn it off on Windows 11 PCs, Copilot enabled, will basically record everything you do on just rapid fire screenshots. And the idea is that the AI over time locally can recall things for you, as it were, get the pun, and help you not just find things, not just as a search thing, but the system with local AIs on the PC, small language models, SLMs, basically allow the computer to basically get to know you and help you on everything. In principle, it's a very good idea. I'm in huge support of this and excited about this. In fact, when this was first announced a couple of years ago, I almost bought a Windows PC just to try this. But then it turned out that Microsoft had not taken some of the basic security precautions. The files on your computer were relatively hackable. They took the product off the market for months, potentially fixed it, and now apparently some new issues are surfacing with researchers are finding new security concerns around this. I'll have a link to this article in the Decrypt a Trade magazine if you're interested to go into the details. But this is an ongoing issue for, again, not just Microsoft, but in general, the most of the big tech and medium tech companies are going to have to figure out how to balance AI capabilities where they need personal data from us to help us use AI a lot more effectively and then anonymously commingle it with the data out in the wild so that the AI gets smarter, and not just about our general priorities, etc., whether it's personal work, but also in specific domains, sensitive domains like healthcare, like finance, etc., and be able to generate far more responsive answers to our queries, and the AI agents do more useful things for us. Consider this, for instance, of what if it was helping us do shopping on personally sensitive items. These are things that come up. And so if these things are not secure at the operating system level by companies like Microsoft, and presumably Apple will have to pay a lot of attention to this as well as and when they roll out these kinds of features. This is a big issue for the industry, Microsoft in particular right now, because they're on the bleeding edge, as it were, with some of these. But this issue of ambient AI recording on PCs and smartphones is a broad issue for the industry, and Microsoft has some speed bumps and stumbling blocks that have come up again, which is consistent with the overall theme of what I've been talking about today on AI Ramblings 56, which now gets us to one of my favorite parts of the show, which is answering some of your questions, listeners and watchers on our YouTube channel, etc. We've got a couple of interesting questions. I said one of the questions, the first one I want to tackle is name one gadget, Michael, where you'd like more AI attention. And this is an area which is near and dear to my heart. I love, as I said on a recent show, I'm a bookaholic, been a Kindle user for a long time. Also, Apple Books, remember them? They have a very good reading app. Google has stuff as well. But I use Kindle hardware. I basically own every Kindle ever made by Amazon, and the Kindle software on all my devices and computers. I just have tons of books on these things, etc. So that's the good news. The bad news is there's very little AI. Amazon, for whatever reason, has done almost nothing with AI around the reading experience. It is an utterly unexplored surface for AI. Everything from summarization, cross-book memory, potentially giving API access to my books to me that I can leverage with Claude Cowork or with Gemini, or give me connectivity to the AI systems of my choice. That would be huge, just as a basic. There is a lot to unlock here, because again, it's an utterly untouched area of just huge amount of data. Obviously, data that I have bought in the form of books, and obviously there are copyright issues as well. But I'm not asking for AI that basically gives me huge paragraphs and summaries, etc. But a lot of additional things, like most widely quoted segments from Goodreads, which was a standalone company I am a big fan of, that Amazon bought, and that in itself has a huge amount of community data around what people love to read and track and follow. None of that has an AI set of applications, etc. So I would love to see more AI, more attention to this vertical by Amazon and just a whole host of other incumbents and startups. So that's my one big answer to that reader question. Second question we got from folks is, what's my most wanted feature? As I've talked about a lot in the last few shows. Last Sunday, I had a huge 10 takeaways and tips on what you should look for if you start to play with these AI systems. What's the one feature near term that I would love on, let's say, AI Claude or Gemini, etc.? And the near-term feature I would love is much more integration of the features across desktop and mobile versions of these AI apps. Right now, almost every one of these systems encourages you to use the desktop version of their AI agent softwares, and Claude Cowork is in the lead. Their Mac app is terrific. Interestingly enough, Google Gemini just announced yesterday their first Gemini Mac app, actually built in Swift, which is Apple's code. I'm getting into the weeds here, but I'm very excited to try it out. So the core features are much more available, as it were, on the desktop computers, because that's where a lot of the processing and memory is, and so on. Smartphones less so. So, but it's very clear that they will all need to move in terms of availability, et cetera, on the mobile side. And I'd love to see that happen in weeks and months and not months and years. So we'll see. But that is one of my most wished for items in terms of more mobile equality capabilities of AI agents with the desktop and actually cross memory integration. That's one of the core things that oftentimes one hand does not know what the other hand can do. And that needs to be figured out as well. So we will see how that evolves. But that's my answer to that question. And so that basically gives us a wrap on episode 56 here today. Lots of speed bumps. These are real, but they don't mean that the overall road is not traversable. And we're on a long journey, and it's going to be a very interesting thing. But these are the speed bumps, and we should watch them and track them. As usual, stay tuned on all of this stuff. One thing I did want to notice, the AI reset to zero today, talking about new features from companies. Google announced new skills for the Chrome browser. I've been talking about AI browsers for a long time, and Google has some big initiative on this front. So in addition to their new Gemini Mac app for their coding product, I'm also keen to track this Google skills as well. And so we'll see that, but that's in AI Reset to Zero 1058, which is out today. So catch up on that if you like. As usual, comments, questions, always welcome. Like and subscribe also would be appreciated. And so thank you for joining us for episode 56. We'll see you tomorrow. Stay tuned.